Chapter 5. The Metamorphosis. The dregs of the cafe swam at the bottom of my mug, still radiating a faint warmth against my palms. Across the small table, Julian Stonewall mirrored the gesture, his own mug cradled in surprisingly long fingers. The remnants of our meal sat between us on the sturdy wooden table, his empty sancocho bowl, scraped clean, and my plate, holding only a few stray crumbs from the last arepa con queso. The cheese, the corn, the sweet plantain, tastes of childhood, tastes of Abuela, tastes that always managed to settle something deep inside me, even if just for an hour. It was a bubble of warmth, a temporary shield against the biting late January wind. I could feel waiting impatiently outside the cheerful yellow door, ready to leach the heat from my bones the moment I stepped back onto the sidewalk. He'd been watching me, of course. Not overtly, not rudely, but with a calm, persistent attentiveness that felt like a physical weight. Assessing. Analyzing. That was his job, wasn't it? To come into our world, the studios, the stages, the grueling physical reality of it, and reduce it to data points, operational efficiencies, budget lines for the foundation board. His questions throughout lunch had been polite, couched in professional curiosity, but their intent was clear. He was probing for weaknesses, for inefficiencies, for the strain points he clearly suspected existed beneath the polished surface of the company. He'd asked about the physical therapy support, referencing the demands of Giselle. I'd given him the standard answer: excellent therapists, conditioning programs, learning to manage. True on the surface. But how could I explain the reality? The sheer volume of need versus the available hours? The specific aches and pains you learned to work through because admitting weakness felt like failure. Like letting down the legacy Abuela had sacrificed so much for? He'd asked about the Nutcracker run, the holiday marathon that left us all hollowed out just weeks ago. I'd acknowledged the intensity, pivoted immediately to the present. What good would it do to tell him about the bone-deep exhaustion, the core dancers pushing through shin splints because they needed the performance pay, the collective holding of breath, hoping no one suffered a major injury before the final curtain? That wasn't data he could put in a neat chart. It was just life in the company, our life. And the point shoes. He'd noticed, of course. He was observant. I had to give him that. He'd framed it carefully, as a universal challenge. And it was. But he couldn't know the frantic calculations. Can this pair last one more rehearsal? Is the darn budget frozen again? Will the new order arrive before these completely die? The quiet stress simmering beneath the surface for so many dancers, especially those in the core, without a soloist's slightly better allotment. I'd given him the textbook explanation. Different feet, different ballets, the continuous process. True again. But, miles away from the full story, the story I had no intention of sharing with this outsider, no matter how politely he asked. He represented the people who held the purse strings, the ones who saw us as assets to be managed, not artists pouring our souls out onto the stage. Now, leaning back slightly, a thoughtful expression on his face, he shifted tactics. The shift was subtle, but I felt it immediately. A slight relaxation in his posture, a softening of his direct gaze. He was moving away from the operational questions that had clearly yielded little beyond my practiced deflections. "Forgive my asking," he began, his voice maintaining its light, conversational tone. "But watching the level of dedication required today, the sheer discipline, it's extraordinary." He paused, letting the compliment hang in the air. It felt genuine, but I remained wary. Compliments could be tools, too. "What drew you to ballet initially?" The question caught me off guard. It wasn't about budgets or schedules or injury prevention. It was personal. My gaze, which had been resting on the floral pattern of my coffee mug, flickered up to meet his. Surprise must have registered on my face before the familiar shutters of caution slammed down. Why this? Why now? Was this just another angle, an attempt to understand the, quote, human resources on a deeper level for his report? Or was he actually curious about Elena, the person, not just Laurent, the principal dancer? I looked down again, tracing the slightly chipped rim of the mug with my index finger. A dozen evasive answers sprang to mind. I always loved to dance. It felt natural. I was inspired by the great ballerinas. Standard lines, Easily delivered. But suddenly, surrounded by the sounds and smells of this place, the place Abuela loved, the practice dancers felt hollow, almost disrespectful to her memory. It was a long time ago, I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. The air felt thick with unspoken words, memories swirling just beneath the surface. I could almost hear Abuela's voice, humming along to a crackling record of Tchaikovsky, her eyes bright with passion. I could feel the scratchy wool of the shawl she always wore, smell the lavender water she favored. I hesitated, the familiar instinct to guard my personal history, warring with the sudden, unexpected wave of nostalgia, brought on by his question in this specific place. El Cafetal wasn't just a restaurant, it was a repository of precious, fading memories. Abuela laughing, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Abuela stirring her coffee with fierce concentration. Abuela telling me stories of Bogotá between sips of ajiaco. Maybe it was the coffee, or the food, or the lingering exhaustion from rehearsal. Maybe it was the quiet intensity of his waiting gaze, expecting something, I added, the words emerging almost reluctantly, pulled from a place I rarely allowed others to see. My Abuela, the name felt warm on my tongue, grounding. She loved the music, I continued, keeping my eyes fixed on the patterns in the wood grain of the table. Old classical records, mostly. Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty. She used to say dancers could fly, just for a little while. A faint smile touched my lips, remembering her theatrical pronouncements, her unwavering belief in the magic of it all. Even now, decades later, the image remained vivid. Abuela, hands clasped, watching grainy footage on an old television, convinced her granddaughter could reach those same heights. She believed. My voice faltered, catching unexpectedly on the simple word. Believed in me, believed in the power of dance, believed it was worth the cost. She sacrificed a lot. The words felt inadequate, barely scratching the surface of the years of scrimping, the extra shifts she'd worked cleaning houses, the quiet pride that radiated from her whenever I mastered a new step. The phone calls filled with encouragement, when homesickness threatened to overwhelm me at the Ballet Academy dorms far from her warmth, so I could learn to fly. The last word was barely a whisper. A tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the smooth facade I worked so hard to maintain. Damn it. I snatched up my coffee mug, bringing it to my lips quickly, using the motion to hide the sudden, treacherous sting behind my eyes. Composure, Elena. Control. It's what kept you safe, what allowed you to survive in this demanding world. I took a deliberate, steadying sip of the lukewarm coffee. When I lowered the mug, my expression was, I hoped, back to its usual neutral state. But had he seen it? That momentary lapse? His face was unreadable, his blue eyes calm, observant. Was he filing it away? Subject displays emotional response when discussing grandmother. Motivation linked to familial sacrifice. Potential leverage point? The thought sent a chill down my spine, colder than the January wind outside. Annoyance warred with vulnerability. Why had I said even that much? It felt like giving away a piece of something sacred, offering it up for his dispassionate analysis. Sense of obligation/sacrifice present. Yes, Mr. Stonewall, it was present. It was woven into the very fabric of my being, into every plie, every extension, every drop of sweat that stained the studio floor. It was the engine that drove me, the ghost that pushed me forward when my body screamed for rest. But it wasn't something I wanted dissected in a boardroom report. My resolve hardened. He would get no more from me. Thankfully, the conversation seemed to reach a natural conclusion after that. He didn't push further on the personal topic, perhaps sensing the boundary I'd hastily re-erected. We lingered for a few more minutes, sipping the last of our coffee. The silence wasn't entirely comfortable on my end. I was too aware of his presence, too busy shoring up my internal defenses, but the familiar sounds of El Cafetal provided a welcome buffer. The rhythmic scrape of chairs, the cadence of Spanish chatter, the cheerful accordion riffs from the speakers. It was the soundscape of a brief escape. I felt a grudging respect for his approach, I had to admit. He wasn't aggressive or overtly critical. His persistence was quiet, methodical. He observed, he listened, he probed gently. It was effective, in its own way. Disarming, almost. which made him more dangerous, perhaps, than someone who came in with overt demands. He was trying to understand the system from the inside out, and I was part of that system. My thoughts drifted inevitably to the rest of the day, stretching out the knots in my shoulders and calves, preparing my point shoes for tomorrow's rehearsal, another pair nearing the end of their useful life. Then Nocturne, and finally sleep, hopefully deep enough to recharge before facing the relentless demands of the studio again. Facing Giselle. Facing the endless pursuit of an unattainable perfection. Facing Mr. Stonewall and his quiet, probing questions again tomorrow. The thought added another layer to my weariness. He caught the server's eye and signaled for the check with a discreet gesture. The ease with which he handled the transaction, a quick tap of a card, a polite nod, spoke of a world different from mine. A world where casually dropping $50 on dinner wasn't something requiring a mental budget adjustment. "Ready?" he asked, already shrugging into his tailored wool coat. It looked expensive, warm. I nodded, pulling on my own practical, much-worn puffer coat, the familiar weight settling on my shoulders. I carefully wrapped my thickest scarf around my neck, tucking the ends in. Each layer felt like adding another piece of armor, preparing myself not just for the frigid air, but for the transition back from the warm haven of El Capital to the cold reality of the city, of my life, of his scrutiny. The brief thaw the restaurant and the memories of Abuela had provided was definitively over. My professional reserve clicked back into place with the fastening of my coat buttons. We stepped out onto the sidewalk. The wind hit immediately, sharp and unforgiving, stealing my breath for a second. It whipped stray hairs across my face and carried the scent of exhaust fumes and damp concrete. The cheerful yellow door of El Capital clicked shut behind us, sealing off the warmth. The city lights seemed harsh against the prematurely dark late-afternoon sky, reflecting coldly off patches of icy pavement. Just as we reached the curb, a sleek black sedan pulled up silently beside us, its engine barely audible. His driver. Of course. My driver was waiting, he reiterated, his voice carrying easily over the wind's howl. He reached out and opened the rear passenger door, holding it expectantly. The warm glow of the car's interior spilled onto the icy sidewalk, a stark invitation. "It's no trouble, really, and certainly warmer than waiting for the train platform tonight," I hesitated. My apartment was a solid 45-minute subway ride away, plus the walk to the station from here, and the walk from the station at the other end. The platforms, especially the elevated one near my stop, would be miserably cold, exposed to this biting wind. Every muscle in my body ached, with a fatigue that went bone-deep after today's intense Giselle rehearsal. The thought of sinking into that warm car seat, of being delivered directly to my door, was incredibly tempting. But accepting felt complicated. It created a small debt, a sense of obligation. It extended our interaction beyond the neutral territory of the restaurant, putting me in his space, however briefly. It felt like conceding something, lowering a barrier I'd carefully maintained. My gaze flickered from the waiting car, its dark windows promising anonymity and warmth, to the bustling street corner further down, where the entrance to the subway beckoned with its familiar, if less comfortable routine. I saw the internal calculation reflected back in his observant eyes as he waited patiently, holding the door. He likely saw the exhaustion plain on my face now, unfiltered by studio lighting, or performance adrenaline, or the soft glow of the cafe. The sheer physical weariness, the weight of my oversized dance bag digging into my shoulder, the knowledge of the cold wait ahead, it tipped the balance. Convenience, just this once, outweighed pride and caution. Finally, with another small, almost reluctant nod, I slid onto the plush leather seat, the warmth instantly enveloping me. I placed my heavy dance bag carefully on the floor beside my feet. It felt too large, too utilitarian for this luxurious space. "Thank you, Mr. Stonewall," I said formally, my voice muffled slightly by the scarf pulled high around my chin. The formality felt necessary, a way to re-establish the professional distance despite accepting the personal convenience. He got in beside me, the door closing with a quiet, solid thud that shut out the city's noise and the wind's howl. He gave the driver my address, spoken quietly, but I heard it clearly. I registered a flicker of surprise in my own mind that he knew it. Had he looked it up beforehand? Part of his thorough preparation, no doubt. My apartment was functional, affordable, further out than most people probably pictured for a principal dancer at a major company. Not the glamorous artist's loft of popular imagination. Almost immediately, I leaned my head back against the cool leather of the headrest and closed my eyes. It wasn't just fatigue, though that was profound. It was a conscious choice, a clear signal. The conversation was over. The analysis, the probing had to stop, at least for today. Let him interpret it as exhaustion if he wished. It wasn't untrue. But it was also a shield, the only one readily available to me now. I could feel his presence beside me in the enclosed space, could sense his stillness. Was he observing me even now, analyzing my posture, my closed eyelids, or was he simply respecting the boundary I'd drawn? I didn't open my eyes to check. Let him think what he would. I needed this moment of quiet, of suspended transit, before facing the demands of the evening, stretching, icing, mentally preparing for tomorrow. The car moved smoothly through the city traffic. Even with my eyes closed, I could track our progress by the changing sounds, the stop-and-go rhythm downtown, the smoother flow as we hit the outer borough, the familiar turns as we approached my building. Streetlights painted fleeting patterns of orange and white across my eyelids. It felt strange, surreal almost, to be sitting here, beside this man whose purpose was to dissect the world I lived and breathed, the world Abuela had dreamed for me. He was looking for flaws in the structure, cracks in the foundation, while I was just trying to hold it all together, performance by performance, day by day. The irony wasn't lost on me. Accepting this small comfort, this ride home, from someone who represented a potential threat, or, at the very least, a significant disruption. He hadn't gotten the easy answers he likely sought for the foundation board today. My walls were still high, perhaps even reinforced after his personal question had inadvertently touched a nerve, reminding me exactly what I needed to protect. He hadn't seen the full extent of the dancer's struggles, hadn't quantified the resource shortages or the immense pressure. But he had seen something. He'd seen the flicker of memory, the hint of sacrifice. He knew about Abuela, even if he didn't understand the depth of what that meant. And he was persistent. This investigation, as he likely thought of it, was far from over. A wave of weary resolve washed over me. Let him analyze his spreadsheets and conduct his interviews. I had faced greater challenges than a polite consultant with observant eyes. I had Nocturne waiting. I had Abuela's belief to honor. I would meet tomorrow, and whatever questions it brought, with the same discipline and control that got me through every performance. I leaned my head deeper into the headrest, conserving my energy. I would need it. The black sedan pulled in front of my building, the quiet, familiar street under the weak glow of a flickering sodium lamp. The contrast between the car's insulated luxury and the slightly worn facade of my apartment building was stark. Functional. Affordable. A world away from the plush interiors Mr. Stonewall inhabited. I fumbled slightly with the door. When I got it to open, the cold hit me like 1,000 knives. The biting air spurred me forward, through the building's entrance, and up the familiar flight of stairs to my own door. Inside, my apartment was quiet, almost echoing after the muffled sounds of the city traffic. I dropped my keys into the small ceramic bowl by the door. Another gift from Abuela, painted with uneven but cheerful blue flowers. My heavy dance bag slumped against the wall with a soft thud, releasing the faint, familiar scent of rosin, sweat, and old leather. I peeled off my coat and scarf, hanging them meticulously on the hooks, shedding the layers of the outside world, the layers of Elena Laurent, principal dancer. The exhaustion I'd held at bay in the car washed over me fully now. Every muscle fiber seemed to hum with fatigue, a deep ache settling into my hips and lower back. The mental drain from the encounter with Stonewall lingered too. The constant vigilance, the careful parsing of words, the effort of maintaining the professional shield. It felt like I just completed a grueling performance, but one conducted across a dinner table instead of a stage. My couch beckoned, soft and worn, promising oblivion. The probing questions, the feeling of being analyzed, the reminder of the weight of expectation, Abuela's, the company's, my own, settled heavily upon me, a bone-deep weariness pulling me down. Just for an hour, maybe two. I let myself sink into the cushions, pulling a worn throw blanket over me, succumbing to the quiet darkness of the apartment. True sleep wouldn't come, not with the thought of the night shift at Nocturne looming, but the stillness offered a brief respite, a chance for muscles to unknot slightly before the demands began again. The minutes ticked by too quickly. Okay, here is the updated section with the shower removed, flowing directly from getting up to choosing clothes for Nocturne. Okay, here is the revised paragraph describing an outfit designed for the specific demands and atmosphere of Nocturne. Eventually, the clock forced me up. Time to prepare for Nocturne. I pushed off the couch, joints protesting slightly despite the brief rest, and headed into my small bedroom. Opening the closet, I bypassed the rows of practical rehearsal wear, soft sweaters, and simple dresses, reaching instead for the section dedicated to Nocturne's particular brand of illusion. My fingers landed on cool, slick fabric. This wasn't about being anonymous. It was about becoming a creature of light and shadow. I pulled out a one-piece garment, a unitard, the color of liquid gunmetal, shot through with threads that shimmered silver under the light. It clung like a second skin, sleeveless with strategically placed cutouts along the ribs and down the spine, designed to highlight the curve of muscle and the fluidity of movement. Fitted and flexible, it would catch every stray beam of light whether I was suspended high above the watchers on the hoop or moving like quicksilver across the platforms below. This was performance armor, designed to mold to my body as I danced like liquid molten metal and commanded attention in Nocturne's manufactured Twilight Dot makeup next. My daily routine was minimal: sunscreen, a touch of concealer if needed, lip balm. But the club was different. It was another kind of mask, perhaps, but one I chose freely. I sat at the small vanity table, its surface cluttered with lotions, hairpins, and a few carefully chosen cosmetics. I smoothed on a tinted moisturizer, evening out my skin tone. Then, eyeliner. A dark, smudgy kohl pencil, blurring the edges slightly, making my eyes deeper, harder to read in the gloom. Not the defined, wide-eyed look required for stage projections, but something more shadowed, more internal. I hesitated over lipstick, then chose a deep berry stain, blotting it carefully so it looked like a natural flush, not a painted-on smile. As I blended the liner, I thought fleetingly of my fellow performers. Their transformations were often far more dramatic. Intricate body paint that turned skin into shifting landscapes, masks that obscured identity entirely, makeup that created illusions of shadow and light on their very faces. They became living art installations, pieces of the club's deliberate, sensory tapestry. There was an extraordinary control in their movements, whether they were twisting through silks high above the crowd or balancing in impossible contortions on a tiny stage. Yet there was a profound vulnerability too. Their bodies offered up for anonymous appreciation. That blend of discipline and exposure, strength and fragility. Hair next. Loose strands were a liability at Nocturne, snagging on equipment, catching the light wrong, breaking the illusion of seamless movement. Precision was key, a different kind than the ballet studio demanded, but just as necessary. My hair, still faintly damp from my earlier shower, was easier to manipulate this way. Using a fine-tooth comb and a touch of stronghold pomade, I meticulously scraped it back from my forehead, pulling it taut against my scalp until it gleamed. Every stray wisp was smoothed into submission. I twisted the length tightly, coiling it into a compact, secure knot low against the nape of my neck, pinning it ruthlessly into place. Sleek, severe, and entirely out of the way, nothing would dare move. It was a familiar feeling, the slight, anchoring pull against my scalp, a necessary constraint for the fluid power required tonight. Jewelry? Nothing ostentatious. Just a pair of small silver hoops that might catch the light, and a thin silver chain Abuela had given me, usually tucked safely away. But tonight, I wanted its familiar weight against my skin, a hidden anchor. Okay, here is the paragraph updated to include the puffer coat and warm scarf. I stood back, surveying the result in the full-length mirror leaning against the wall. The gunmetal unitard clung to me, silver threads catching the dim light, hinting at how it would fracture the strobes at Nocturne. My hair, slicked back severely, threw the lines of my face into sharp relief, my eyes looking darker, intense beneath. It wasn't Elena Laurent, principal dancer. It wasn't the polite, guarded woman who'd shared dinner with James Stonewall. This was the performer Nocturne demanded. Streamlined, deliberate, radiating a contained energy waiting to ignite under the club lights. Ready for the stage, perhaps, but definitely not for the subway. I grabbed a pair of worn, soft black joggers from a drawer, pulling them on over the unitard's fitted legs, instantly softening the sharp silhouette. Before I could leave, though, there was ritual. The new pair of point shoes I had picked up at the studio today. I grabbed the out of my bag by the door and unwrapped them, stiff and pristine satin, gleaming softly under the lamp. Picking one up, I began the meticulous, strangely intimate process, unique to every dancer, not just softening the shoe, but shaping it precisely to the architecture of my foot, my strength, my specific needs on the floor. Holding the heel firmly, I bent the shank back and forth against the edge of my sturdy bookshelf, listening to the satisfying crack of the layers of glue and cardboard yielding, working it until it achieved the perfect curve to support my high arch, without resisting it. I stepped carefully onto the box, using my weight methodically to flatten and slightly widen it, ensuring space for my toes when en pointe. Then came the wings, the stiff sides of the box, crushing them inwards with strong thumbs, tailoring the fit until it felt like a second skin. Each dancer discovers their own secrets. Softening the box by slamming it in a door jamb just so, using tiny amounts of water, scraping the soles for traction. Mine involved focused pressure here, a slight twist of the heel there, ensuring the shoe would become a silent, supportive extension of my body. The scent of glue and satin, so incongruous with the impending bass-heavy air of Nocturne, filled my small apartment. The image of Julian's politely confused face flickered. What would he make of this harsh, unglamorous necessity? Pushing the thought aside, I picked up the second shoe, repeating the focused, methodical process. Satisfied for now. They would need more work, always more work. I set the shoes in the crossbody bag I used for Nocturne. I took my puffer coat from the hook, its bulk instantly hiding the lines beneath, and wound a thick, warm scarf around my neck, tucking the ends securely inside the zipped-up coat. Functional camouflage and necessary warmth for the journey through the city, essential before shedding this mundane skin and stepping fully into the night's work. I could almost feel the music already, the deep, pulsating bass that vibrated through the floor, through your bones. Could almost picture the ambient flow of the place, the way performers sometimes seem to materialize out of the shadows, moving through the space like nocturnal creatures. A pair of aerialists descending unexpectedly on flowing silks from the high, dark ceiling rafters, their movements fluid, sensual, athletic. A contortionist weaving slowly, impossibly, between drinkers lounging on low couches, their body a fluid sculpture under the shifting lights. Glimpses of extraordinary physical feats, woven into the very fabric of the night, hinting at stories told not with grand narratives but with breath, muscle, and shadow. Phone charged? Yes. Keys? Ready by the door. My fingers closed around the crossbody bag. ID, card, cash, the berry lip stain. Essentials for the performer I'd become tonight. But not all of Elena Laurent could be shed so easily. My hand felt the outline of the newly worked-on ballet slippers through the fabric, a tangible link to my other life, the one that felt increasingly complicated after dinner with Julian. Necessary tools. Already prepped. Compartmentalization was key. Different bags for carrying the tools of each world, ready to disappear into one. I took a final glance around my quiet, orderly apartment. The neat stack of ballet scores on the small bookshelf. The carefully rolled-up yoga mat in the corner. The single-framed photo of Abuela, younger, smiling, on the windowsill. My disciplined world, waiting patiently for my return. Leaving it felt like stepping out of uniform in a more profound way than just changing clothes. It was a deliberate departure, a conscious choice to immerse myself in an environment governed by different rules, different energies. The anticipation was a low hum beneath my skin now, mingling with the persistent ache in my muscles. I locked the door behind me, the click echoing in the quiet hallway. The descent in the rattling elevator felt like the beginning of the transition. Down, away from the light, towards the street, towards the taxi I would hail, towards the pulsing heart of the club waiting in the city's anonymous depths. A place to get lost. A place where bodies moved with intention, yes, but an intention far removed from Patipa or Balanchine. A place where physicality could be purely sensation, purely escape, underscored by the throb of the bass and glimpsed performances that spoke of a different, perhaps darker, perhaps freer kind of flight than the one Abuela dreamed of for me. After today, after Stonewall's careful dissection, the need for that escape felt sharper, more urgent than ever.